the meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission for Friday, February 24th, 2023, being held at 2 p.m. in the Don B. Griffin Room at Town Hall in Harwich. So we have two agenda items here. The first item is a request for a certificate of compliance for 56 Permakeen Lane, map 24, partial H17, SE 32-2293 for a new dwelling and appurtenances. So how shall we go here? Do you want to?
You want me to speak to it?
Do I need to say?
I'll just let you know
Okay.
that after the last meeting where we kind of put it on hold, the request for cert in order to get an engineer's letter, that they were able to get an engineer to go out and evaluate the site. And they did submit a letter saying that the property is in substantial compliance. There were a few things that were slightly off, meaning the AC units or the condenser on the side of the building, the deck not being in exactly the same footprint as approved, but within the limit of work, and a strip of earth between this property and the neighboring property to the south not being vegetated, and it was just supposed to be grass. So, I know that they will be doing.
We already did it.
Okay, so they stabilized that dirt on the side, which is great. Hopefully working with the building department to make sure that your utilities that are in the floodplain are
Secured to the house.
secured appropriately. And the reason the deck was supposed to have a notch kind of cut into it to help with egress around the building, but it is all within the limit of work. And I think it would have been approved. It's not many, it's only a few more square feet, it's not big. So with some ongoing conditions regarding no pesticides, herbicides, rodenticides, fertilizers, with those ongoing conditions, I would recommend a cert of compliance for them now.
Okay, any discussion?
I just have one question. How'd you get an engineer to get up there so fast?
As soon as we walked out here, I was texting like crazy. So I got Danny Gonzalez from down Cape Engineering.
Good.
So I just said, I begged him, basically said, you're gonna hold up our gonna hold up our closing. We really need that cert. So he came out.
So the property is for sale?
Yeah, the property sold.
Sold.
Yeah, sold quickly, right around Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I'd just like to say the same thing. Thank you for doing what you did.
Oh,
I'm
God.
sorry that we had to go that route, but it's just to make sure everything's consistent with everybody in the town. It's a nice thing, and appreciate your
Oh,
efforts
no,
on that.
we appreciate working with the town of Harwich, so.
And good luck with everything.
All right, thank you guys.
Oh, no, no.
Oh, wait.
A vote.
No, sorry.
Go ahead.
Nope, I asked.
I just have one comment, one question rather.
Sure.
In the letter from the engineer, he's referring to an older order of conditions and asking that we issue certs for both. What is the deal with that?
It's not ours. He probably did not know that that was a superseding order of conditions that is actually null and void with only DEP. Previously, there was, in 1999, a project proposed on this, or approved on this, denied on this site from us. They appealed, got approval from DEP, so DEP had a superseding approval. They didn't do work under that permit. So I know that you've been in touch with DEP and requested a cert from them for that old one to get it off the books.
Yeah,
So we don't
Okay,
have to
that's
do
not
anything
our-
with it,
okay.
yeah.
just this one.
They already sent it in, I think, so we have it on record.
Yep.
It's really easy, you just call them up, because yours superseded it, they didn't have any interest, is what they basically said.
Yeah, they'll let us do the work, it's fine.
Okay. I have a motion.
Sure. I'll move that we authorize the issuance of a certificate of compliance for 56 Permakeen Lane, map 24, parcel H17, SE 32-2293.
I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
One abstention.
Oh, you're abstaining? Okay.
We will have it ready for you by end of day Monday.
Perfect.
Do you want us to call you or email you to pick up?
Yeah, either one works.
You'll have to bring it to the Registry of Deeds.
Yep, sounds good. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Have a good day.
You too.
Okay, so next on the agenda is discussion and possible vote on a work session on proposed revisions to Bell's Neck Land Management Plan, which is a continuation of our discussion from January 27th of this year. So, my thought about this at the moment, how to proceed right now, is have a general discussion, presuming everybody has had a chance to review the document and get general comments, and then step through the detailed comments and just have a discussion around those. But I'd sort of like to get a sense of where everybody is at with this first. So, I don't know. Let's start with Wayne.
No, why don't you start on the other side? I haven't had a chance to really look at this thing.
All right, Brad.
Yeah, not much for me. I went through the draft in response to your comments. I think you're the only one that commented on that draft that Amy sent us. And so.
I added some new stuff, which is now in your Dropbox, but
Okay.
it's more in response to your and John's comments.
Mhm. Yeah, so for me, I've been through the whole thing, several times. I think I'm ready to respond to other commissioners' comments and move towards a finalized document, or near final document. So I think, from my end, it wouldn't take a lot of effort to have a near final edit. So, anxious to hear what other people have to say.
Guess that's me, huh?
It is.
Okay. Take one, pass it down if you would kindly. That's one for you. It's a list of my concerns and issues to address throughout the region from both sides of it. Take a peek at that, and I'd be glad to answer any questions about my thoughts if you would like, or elaborate on any of it.
These are a bunch of detailed comments, and personally, rather than sitting here and staring at this, I'd rather hear you step through them.
Okay?
I don't know if, and that may take a little while, but I think it's worthwhile, because, my first impression is that some of these are very detailed and just have to do with the details of the document, and maybe others are more global and looking for.
Perfectly fine. Yep, well, I can start at the beginning, and the first area of concern are the accesses to the reservoir in a number of locations. There's a lot of erosion and a lot of washing in a lot of cases, and in many cases, that can be controlled very, very easily by adding some water bars, which is just logs, to break it up. But nonetheless, there has to be the ability of the labor to get it done, because it is, it is work. That's a concern. The piles that were used to block off various trails and access points off of Bell's Neck, to my way of thinking, they should be replaced with something that was movable, should it need to be. Either, in certain cases, gates or fence of fashion. Something similar to what's on the other side down around the bogs.
We can do that.
In just to stretch into a little bit, that would also look a whole lot more appealing in general than some of the piles that are askew. You're not gonna stop people from running through there periodically with a motorcycle or something. You're gonna have a degree of that. But for the most part, they'll go around a piece of fence rather than go through it, or I'm sure that would be their plan anyway. And, also the issue of fire or rescue, should there ever be an emergency out there, is a concern. Bell's Neck Road in particular, starting at the north end, traveling south, relocating the parking areas, all 3 parking areas, to get well back away from the resource would be of particular concern, because each one of them is right on top of the resource.
Yep. Can I ask a clarifying question?
Please.
When you say the 3 parking areas, because what are you counting as the 3 parking areas?
There's a parking area right by the,
At the kiosk,
yes, by the kiosk.
yeah?
That's right on top of the resource.
Yep.
Going further down, it's the same thing down by the footbridge.
Okay, yep,
Right, get a parking area down there, and then all the way down before you get to the salt marsh at the other end of Bell's Neck Road, just before the river.
Where
There's
the
a
car-
parking
the
area
car
right
bridge?
there.
The car bridge?
Yes,
Okay. I just want to make sure, because there's a couple pull-offs all over the place.
understood.
Okay,
There's ample place going back away that can be very easily converted or utilized for parking, just to pull that back away from the resource area.
that was one of my priorities too.
Road-based material that's out there that's been stockpiled, just seems to me that that should not be there. The intent is to preserve the area, and having stockpiles of road material, I can understand the convenience from the DPW's perspective, but
Where is that?
There's a couple
there's
piles all along.
several places, 3 or 4 that I can think of right off the top of my head. But you'll see it, they're piles of road material that's been dumped in various locations. And they use it clearly for access to grab when they're dressing up the roads, which is understandable, but less than desirable. The grading and the runoffs, the methods that the DPW uses are limited partially because of what they have for equipment. And I'm very certain the operator or operators have done the best they can with what they've got to work with. By and large, the road isn't in terrible condition, but through the process of grading it in that fashion with the particular equipment the town has, what's happened is the road's been cut wider all the time. There's very little place for the water to travel in a ditch to either side, which would be customary in a gravel road, because the idea of crowning a road is to get the water off the surface as quickly as possible. Therefore, it wants to travel on the edge of the road, not down the center. Well, through this process, what's happened is they've cut sluices of sort off in various places for the water to run, which is understandable, and it does control the flow. However, every time that happens, they're pushing material out onto the marsh.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, I think there's 10 or a dozen spots like that. So when you look at it all, there's definitely an impact.
So Mark, resources aside, what is your idea of how to fix that set of problems? I mean, forget how much it costs or who's gonna do it. I mean, what would you suggest?
For the overall,
Well, the set of
circumstance?
problems having to do with the grading of the road, the fact that drainage isn't right, the fact that grading the road pushes undesirable sediment out into the resource area. It sounds like the road needs to be.
It does, it needs to be
Rebuilt.
revamped. And, because in short, what would happen is one section of the road needs to be elevated, the water needs to be shifted to the other side, and then there needs to be some retaining or retention areas established to catch the runoff. They in turn could be cleaned periodically, which would be a maintenance item going forward for the region.
What is it you need to do in order to make that a stable and long-term solution to the problem? Is it just raising the grade, leaving it a dirt road? Don't you still have the same problem? It will continue to need to be graded and you'll...
Nope, gravel road is always gonna require maintenance, no matter who does it and no matter whatever happens. What's gonna have to happen is you're gonna need to have a plan, obviously, for the mechanics of it to go through. This was part of the discussion we had quite some time ago with DBW, and when we had a town engineer at the time. Hopefully we'll have one again. But, you know, when that happens, then maybe that could be addressed. The road, in essence, would be largely rebuilt to achieve all of this.
With fill and a gravel surface is...
A gravel surface, very similar to what's there right now. I don't think it's gonna require very much fill, maybe in a couple of spots. But overall, I think what's there is adequate, it's just in the wrong place.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Last conversation we had about this, there was some discussion about the bridges. My feeling is that footbridge down there should be turned back into an auto bridge. I just think it would be beneficial in general. Elevating the road on either side of the bridge, both bridges actually, I think would be beneficial. That would help from pushing the graded material off into the edges of the marsh. I mean, there's a lot of degradation on both sides of both bridges just because of that over the years.
So, would you be open, I mean, I'm just thinking about how these things get reflected in this document. Assuming we reach agreement about it. I mean, what you're talking about in terms of the general regrading stuff seems like it needs attention sooner rather than later.
I would feel so, yes.
Rebuilding footbridge or in any way is sort of a longer-term proposition, so it would seem like how these things would get included into the land management plan would be, those would be like separate items.
What I would
Like, also-
recommend is kind of make a list of priority action items. But separate that list into a list of low-hanging fruit, things that we can do in-house with relatively little resources, and then things that are gonna require planning, engineering, more money, things like that. So, that was gonna be my suggestion, is to create a new priorities management list for the commission.
Well, that makes sense. To me, that makes perfect sense. Because you gotta start with something.
Yeah. And there are some things that we can accomplish quickly.
Yep. Let me see. You have a continuation of the same issues as you go up North Road on the south side of the footbridge. There's places up there that makes the river accessible, and, you know, again, the simplicity of water bars up there would help a little bit, would clean it up a little bit, and just generally keep some of the sediment and so forth from washing down and being traveled.
Can you clarify for me again what water bars are exactly?
In that case, basically, they're logs. If you have a path, a travel path, a water bar, which could be a number of different types of material, basically they're steps of sorts. Its primary intention is to slow up any flow. When you're traveling on a path, sometimes you'll notice that people have got logs dug in
Oh, yeah, sure.
periodically.
What you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. In a case like that, where it's a totally natural area, that type of thing is gonna be beneficial. As the logs deteriorate, whether they were 20 feet off in the woods or right there, it isn't gonna make any difference.
So, but they're transverse, they're not parallel, they're
They're gonna
going
cross the
across
path.
Across the, I see, okay.
Correct,
They're
right,
not-
so-
They're not in the water, they're just there to slow down runoff.
To break down the flow, to break the flow, exactly.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, that's the extent of my comments on the road, unless you want to go into extreme detail, which doesn't make any sense, that's engineering. But the bog area at the other side, that's another story unto itself. In addition to what's already been done down by the herring run, the fence and so forth that was put in this past year, I think is beneficial. But I mean, I'd like to see that continue and adjust the grading down there and essentially clean up the parking area and trap the water before it's dispersed as it is right now. I think that could be a little cleaner and generally be a little more beneficial. To me, it would be positive to revisit the cranberry cultivation issue, primarily on the center bog as you come into the area. Given how much cranberry bog has been lost in town in recent years, Jenkins Bog was a huge one. The Main Street bogs are out of production as I see it. The loss of the acreage right there on Bell's Neck, not to mention anything else that's taken place over the years. Over the years, it's got to be in the hundreds of acres that have been taken out of production, but I mean, just in recent years, we're probably talking of close to 50 acres in those 3 parcels that are taken out of production. I think an opportunity for that center bog right there to be utilized might be a healthy thing for the region, and I also think it's a good item to continue for the town. By doing that, to me, it seems to make sense to go to the north bog. That bog, to me, seems to be a whole lot harder bottom and a lot closer to firmer ground than many cases. And I would be leaning towards closing up the ditches to shed the water, let the water drift down out of there and stay drier. Let it naturalize, but do it in a fashion where it's not going to continue to be a swamp. I would encourage the opportunity to rehabilitate the center bog as well as the little bog down by the pump house and by the pond hole. Establishing a dike, the south side of the pond hole, to maintain and control water and allow water drainage from the center bog to flow downstream could be directed right there. Continuing to naturalize the southern bog, I don't see as being a bad thing. Controlling the Phragmite is a big undertaking all by itself, but, you know, while it's still manageable, to me, it seems like that's of pretty big importance. I think in general, that sums it up of what my thoughts were about the area.
Okay. Well, let's move on around the room here and see. Jim?
Well, I really didn't have any substantive comments. I did have 2 sort of administrative or editing type issues, and I think, John, one of them was taken care of by your comments. But the other one was all throughout the document, the term is used, the act. Now, I think we all know what that means, but I didn't see, and maybe I missed it, it needs to be at least defined at
Yeah,
one
sure.
point in the document. And then we can use it just as the act through the rest of the document. And
Okay,
maybe
well-
I just missed where it was defined.
Yeah, Amy's, I can see Amy right now, so that's easy.
That's an easy
yeah.
fix.
Yeah, and that was really my only comment, Jack.
All right. Alan?
Well, thanks. There's a lot of discussion for all of this. There's a lot of things, but the biggest thing that I see is having the action, if that's what we call it, action items, which would probably fall into section 6.0, 5-year maintenance summary in this plan. I don't know if that would be put in the forefront of it or at the end of it, but you really need to identify what we need to do. Plan's one thing, but executing is another. And everybody has great ideas, and of meeting the rubber, meeting the road, whatever that saying is there. That's what we need to do, and I'm hoping that we can. And what Commissioner Coleman brought up, a lot of good bulleted items that we discussed the last time. And he has good ideas, and I agree with him 110%. And I hope that we can incorporate his ideas, our ideas into an action so that something can get done and mitigate what's going on down there now, so it doesn't become a lot larger cost down the road by identifying these problems and fixing them now. That's my comments. And then the last comments, everybody in this room knows how I feel about the cranberry bogs, and if we can keep the center one, I'm all for it. There's ways of doing it. Mark has good suggestions about the southern portion, let that go fallow. I agree with the dike going across there by the pump house. I agree 180% to keep the bogs going, because that's just who we are, and it's part of the environment and the culture and the heritage, and there's no reason why we can't. And that's the way I'll end that comment. There's no reason why we can't, in my opinion. So that's all I have to say.
No, I think we want to get some stuff started right away. As Amy said, low-hanging fruit. There's a whole bunch of them here that could be done for short money and could be done right away. You replace the piles to block off the trails, clean the trails for emergencies, remove the stockpile T-base, fence the waterfront on the beach there, and establish the manageable access spots to the water and the road. That's all simple stuff. Continue water bar installation at river access locations, remove the stockpiles on North Road, correct the culvert, fix that on North Road, and then, let's see, at the Herring Run there, correct the grading and to stop the erosion around the area by the Herring Run, and manage the fragmites and the South Bog. That's all stuff that could be done right away. I mean, it should think, it sounds like inexpensive stuff to do, and that's a start. The other stuff, we could, be working on the plans and getting an engineer to design the road and all that stuff, while other stuff's being done.
Amy?
Thank you for putting this together, and everybody who contributed. It's really helpful. Some of the worn paths to the water's edge, I'll just note that we actually, instead of putting water bars there and kind of encouraging potentially more use, I would recommend eliminating a lot of those social trails, having specific access points, and enough of them for people to get down to the water. But a lot of ones have been worn out by people, just making their own paths to go fishing and hunting, and there's just too many, and they fragment the habitat. So I would say selective, water bar installation and then blocking off of other trails. We've tried in the past to block off some of those social trails by cutting down trees or placing a lot of brush in the paths. People are very industrious and decide to just recreate them, but it's a constant management thing. But we don't need as many access points as we have there. You can still provide people plenty of great access, but cut the amount in half. So that would be the only thing there. I wouldn't, I would eliminate some. What we could do is, like we said, Melissa and I could put together a list of, if we can come to an agreement on some of these things that we want to do, put together a list of each of them, kind of two lists, low-hanging fruit and things that are going to take more time and resources, money. And then you could prioritize those. That certainly helped us. And essentially rewrite section 5 which is the management goals. And some of them are the same, are gonna stay the same, but rewrite section 5, management goals and environmental impacts. So some of them are the same, but some are gonna be a little different. But we could focus our efforts on section 5. And a lot of the other points that came up, like Brad, I definitely think we need to add a fish section. We have everything else but here. So I would love your help and those of your counterparts with coming up with a fish list. The document could in general be organized much better. It's redundant in places, and there's things where, things just don't make sense the way they're formatted, where it's outlined. But yeah. There's some things we may not even need to put in the plan because there's things that maybe Melissa and I, in terms of, removing the piles of the T-base, and instead of the stone piles to block off the trails off Bellis Neck Road, now, back in the day, we didn't have it, but now we have that heavy-duty post and rail fence that we've been using along parking lots, and just one section of that would be easy, and all they are is, there's 2 screws that go in, so if you need to get in there in case of an emergency, it's super easy to take that right off. Anybody with a, screwdriver can do that. So there's a few things that we may not even need to put in the plan, because there's a few things we can probably tackle, DPW might be able to help us with ASAP.
But shouldn't they be in the plan? I mean,
If you want them to be. We can say it's in the plan and we did it.
right, so my feeling is, since this is elaborating on or updating a 10-year-old document, I think it would be good to clearly delineate between goals that were stated in the original document that have already been accomplished, and then goals from the original document, and any new goals are in a separate section of action items, the way they're being discussed. I mean, I very much agree with what Alan said and what Wayne is saying, those action items have to be very clearly stated so that we have a clear path ahead. And my feeling about all these things is, I think almost all of them are things that we can all agree on, and maybe already do all agree on. There's maybe a couple areas where there's different points of view. And, the talk about the center bog, I think what that actually means, keeping the center bog, I mean, again, if we're talking about clearly identifying what actions can and should be taken, that applies as much to any objective of retaining the center bog as an active cranberry growing area. That needs to be very clearly stated. How does that happen?
Yeah.
And as a goal, I mean, I'm not sure how to deal with that in the document. I mean, it's sort of, the same thing also sort of applies, maybe in a different way, to the suggestion that the North Road Bridge be restored as an automobile bridge. It's sort of unclear what the path is to doing that.
That's
How
a
that gets done.
large
How
multi-departmental
that gets
path.
done. And so, but I think we can handle that with this document without getting hung up in deciding or agreeing on exactly what that means, as having that as a goal without a near-term action item. And And I'm not sure if that applies to the center bog or what, because if you're gonna actually retain the ability to grow cranberries there, right? We can't wait 3 years, right? I mean, that thing is already down the road, and if you wanna grow cranberries there, the rehabilitation has to start now.
5 years ago.
Okay, so, but, yeah, my question is, how does that happen? Who's gonna do that and how does that happen? And then, in this context, how do we deal with that in this plan? But Brad has something to say, so Brad.
Yeah, I think it's really important to get this on the table, because I feel like we're stepping back on this concept. This commission has discussed this issue a lot. Voted on option 2, which is gradual restoration for the bogs. So, you know, I respect where you're coming from, I know where you're coming from, because you've been part of all these discussions, and as well as other members who feel like keeping that bog. But my point is, I really think we're stepping back on this issue. This commission voted in 2012 to support the first plan, which recommended gradual naturalization of the bogs. And then this commission, from 2017 to 2020, had numerous public hearings to discuss the issue. And in the end, it was a 5-1 vote to go to option 2 to naturalize the bogs. The fact is, you know, I think we're working on nostalgia here. You know, all over the Cape, it's been shown that the leasing of conservation lands for cranberry bog production has not been feasible. It hasn't worked in recent decades. It's not viable. It's not often a good idea for the goals of the conservation lands. So I respect where you guys are coming from on this, but I ask, how do we veer from the path we're already on by vote? We have an approved plan, and so some of these other things are new, and so we should discuss them. But if we're going to veer back into that, we have to have a discussion and a vote, because right now the commission has voted for option 2.
It would have to be a public hearing and advertised. I would put it back, not just a discussion like we're having here, but that would, to change a decision.
So why would we go back and do that after all the time this commission spent? I understand you want to win this one, but at some point, I don't think it's a viable idea. A lease of that property is good for one person, and it hasn't been good for the people that have had the lease in recent decades. So I just think for that location, I'm not being disrespectful of cranberry bogs. I think for that location, it's not a good idea. And I thought this commission has vetted that a lot in the last decade. But you know, we can return to that vote if people really want to. I just don't know why we would. And I wonder about all the time volunteers spent on this commission discussing this issue over those 10 years. And I don't even know if the vote's there now. So is it really a fruitful practice to go ahead and do this? So I put that out there. You know, where do we stand? I think I know where we stand, but where do people feel that we stand on this? And what's the avenue to change it or revisit it?
I just have a couple comments.
Yeah.
For you, Chairman. So, it's a very volatile conversation in this room. And so, some of the members weren't on that board when they made the decision. And, you know, if we could find a way to make something happen, I'm all for it. I understand where you're coming from, I respect where you're coming from, but I look at harvesting herring. We have a decision to harvest herring or not harvest herring. It's no different than harvesting cranberries or not harvesting cranberries. So I don't see any difference in that. You have decisions that can be made ongoing down the road. Now hypothetically, who's to say that cranberries in 10 years, just putting this out there, is a miracle fruit that cures something that they never even knew it didn't cure. And we got bogs that are growing up all over the place, and you'll see 100 guys come down the Cape, we want to build bogs over. I mean, so I want to keep it viable and an option somehow, some way. That's my opinion. However, I understand where you're coming from. Then you made some comments about different towns not being viable in leasing bogs. Well, Town of Yarmouth leases all their bogs. Falmouth, I know they had some problems up there in the river, the Coomanassett River and all those things, but they still lease the bogs. Pocasset, Town of Dennis, they stopped the one over by Sassuat Harbor. Dr. Fennels, the town of Dennis got rid of that. And then Brewster and Dennis teamed up on another bog on Slough Road, and they put that out of commission because it's next to the water wells. So bogs are still viable. They're still everywhere. I don't want to belabor this, because I know it's just, oh, here we go again. But when they're gone, they're gone. And it's up to us, and it's our future. It is a heritage thing, just like the heron. You know, the selectmen every town meeting is supposed to talk about the heron. It's a thing that's been going on for 200-300 years, so I just don't, and then keeping it open space, and I know we talked about this before, you said, well, you like the habitats. Well, I like open space. I mean, everybody has their opinions of what they like and don't like, so, but what's the use, what's the best use for the area? Are we turning everything into just walking paths for dogs and people? Is that what our goals are now, I guess, in the town of Harwich? Are we gonna buy additional conservation lands going forward in the future? Are we gonna buy bogs that are production now and then just put them out of production? Is that that's our new charge, is to just buy land and put everything out? I mean, I don't know. So it's a hard pill to swallow, knowing that the area, I never knew of any cranberry grower having a problem that leased it from the town before. I know that the last lease he left because he wasn't viable for him. Well, that doesn't mean it wasn't viable for everybody else. So, I don't know. It's just a hard one. And then the action plans, let's get something done. The only other thing I want to say is signage. We forgot about signage, you know, because I think signage is a good thing to, you know, identify, this is why we got this is where it's at, this is what it can be, help protect the area, blah, 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 blah. That's good marketing and PR for us too, so, I don't know. Thank you.
I have some comments, if no one else has anything to say at this moment. My feeling about this particular discussion about the bog in particular is
Sorry about that. I forgot to shut it off.
that the reality is, as Brad pointed out, there was a vote, and we have a plan in place based on the vote. Your point, Alan, is that it's a different commission now, and that may be the case, but we're not going to change that plan without another vote. That's the first reality. I don't particularly think it's a good idea for us to try to take a vote about that issue today. And part of the reason I think that is that while you've stated your aspiration here, as far as I can tell, it's only an aspiration. If you actually want to keep that bog as a viable bog for production, you have to have a very concrete plan in place. Like we've said for everything else, we're not gonna get anything done here unless we have very explicit action items. I still have no idea how retention of that bog as a productive cranberry growing bog would take place. As far as I understand it now, it's not an economically viable option for anybody. And, you know, we could go back to the discussion about should we try to put that more limited thing out for lease, or is there some other path? But without some very concrete steps in that direction, I don't think there's anything for us to do. I think it's really on you as the advocates for doing that to come up with a concrete plan that we could take some or we could at least have a concrete conversation about how would that actually happen, and does the Conservation Commission actually want to go ahead with that? And if that's what you want, it's really on you to do that. And I don't think there's any point in having a vote about that or trying to change what this document says about the cranberry bog without having that detailed conversation about what it is that would actually mean to retain that bog as a productive cranberry bog. And I don't think it's like herring, because you can stop herring for 20 years and then start a herring catch. You can't stop cultivating cranberry bog for 20 years and then expect to put it back into production. It takes time and money, right? I shouldn't be saying this, I'm not a farmer, but you know that, it takes time and money to keep even the bog fallow, so you might lose later. And how would that happen? You haven't put forward any plan for how that would happen, how that would actually, that option would be maintained. And so I don't know what we would put in this document about that. And I would really like to focus on solidifying, concretizing this document, so we have a set of very specific action items that we can keep track of and try to get done.
Mr. Chair, if I could say, I think this is probably the primary change between the last plan. It's the big change to move away from leasing a cranberry bog operation there. So I would like to resolve this issue as soon as possible. I really feel this commission has spent a lot of time on this topic, and I'd hate to see this bogged down the plan.
How do you suggest we resolve the issue as soon as possible, Brad?
For me, we voted on a plan, and it was vetted very well, and so if folks don't want to respect that and carry on with that, then I think we need to have a vote probably the next meeting or two, and just work this out. It's a big issue, and these other issues are kind of minor in my mind in terms of what we can work on, and I'd rather not see this draw out for another year or two.
Well, if it draws out for another year or two, it's gonna be less of a feasible option anyway. And my view, well, we can have a vote. I don't think we're ready to have a vote today. I don't think it's gonna accomplish anything today. If you think it's a good idea, I don't know, how do other people feel about that?
So I do think it needs to be an actual public hearing if you're gonna make a change to the use again. So that, this is not a hearing today, so this is just an agenda that it did not go in the paper. It was just a really work session for us to work these things out. So whatever we wanted to do today would not be the appropriate time to take a vote. I didn't think we were gonna get there today. I didn't even think of that. So if you wanted to put it, there's a legal ad in the agenda, on an agenda upcoming, we could definitely do that, but it has to be a public hearing. That's the right way to do it.
Mark?
Thank you. Just to respond to your remarks, Brett. My understanding of the vote that was accepted was that some form of agriculture may still be permitted. It was a consideration. There was some conversation about including the tech school if there was some interest. What I tried to do was put forth an opportunity for something. I don't think you and I are ever going to 100% agree on this, and I can accept that. But I think the opportunity exists for some minor agricultural activity there. And I think this is a means of establishing that if there's enough interest in the idea.
I think the intent was the kind of the fringe upland areas for like wetland shrubs and that type of shrub culture. I don't think there's a lot of interest in leasing the cranberry bogs, for that discussion, that period. There was an option that did that, and that was not supported. So we can go back and look at that language, but I think that's what it was. Is there a cooperative project available that could teach kids how to raise wetland plants, shrubs, that type of thing in one of the sections? And I think everyone felt that was a good concept. But if we're going to revisit a bog lease for those two middle sections, then to me we're just going right back to where we were. And obviously, we're not going to have full agreement on that one. It's just not going to happen. So I don't know. one of the things was that the public hearings were designed, or at least one of the intents was to encourage people to come out and say, hey, I'd like to work in this concept with a tech school, I'd like to work in this concept with, local landscaping companies. That didn't materialize. So that concept really didn't get a lot of showing of public interest. And it may just be that it was, just the way things went. People didn't come out. But I'm not sure it's wetland plants, or is it leasing logs? Two very different things.
Well, so, again, unless we have a vote, which would be associated with a public hearing, I guess, things are gonna remain the way they are. So, I mean, my view is we should proceed with this document as if there were no changes to the decisions that have already been made.
It's fine, we have work we can do.
And there's plenty to do there, so, and then, the thing that you're proposing, the ideas you're advocating, Mark, how would you turn that, what would the topic of a public hearing be? If we need to change that part of the decisions we made and a public hearing is required, what do you envision would be discussed at that public hearing? What would we advertise that we're contemplating?
Cooperative effort.
Advertised as release.
Well, not necessarily released. What if it was maintained as an actual town bog under the jurisdiction and operation of the Conservation Commission? With the commissioners having the ability to oversee what actually takes place there. We have subcommittees for various other things and various interests. Maybe this could be something of that nature, perhaps.
Any other comments? I don't, honestly, I don't know where to go with this, because that still sounds vague to me, and,
John?
yeah,
I mean, from my point of view, and you guys know a lot more about this stuff than I do, I mean, the detailed discussion that you were asking for before we even consider a vote would be extremely helpful to me in sort of understanding what the feasibility of that issue would be before we even take a vote. And as Amy pointed out, not only would we have to understand it, but we would have to have public hearings in order, before we even considered taking a vote.
I think the first question that needs to be answered is what exactly is feasibility? If you're talking about financial feasibility, that's one issue. If the issue of feasibility of the restoration of the project, that's something else. It's not clear to me that the commission can debate or instruct anybody to enter an agreement based on the financial merit.
I'm not sure where you're going with that.
It's pretty simple. For any body to insist that somebody takes on a property with the sole intention of turning a profit isn't necessarily ever going to take place. And I think in many cases, that's probably the secondary, or even further down the line, a priority.
Okay, so if you're reacting to my comment, that, as far as I understood, that cranberry cultivation in that bog is not financially feasible, I was not a million miles from suggesting that that would be something that we would try to impose on anybody. It's just a question of whether anybody's willing to pay the money to lease the bog and is making enough money doing it to properly maintain the bog. And that is a judgment that has to be made if that's what we're considering, we do have to consider that. You know, if you're renting your house to someone who's impecunious and you're afraid they're not gonna take care of it, and when you get it back, it's gonna be a mess, you probably don't wanna rent your house to that person. So, you're right, we can't impose that requirement in a lease, I don't think, but we can require the lessee to maintain the property. So, again, what is the actual interest? What are the odds that you actually find a lessee who's going to, you know, live up to their obligations under a lease? That's the question. And I think, like Brad said, we already discussed this and decided, I mean, that was one of the considerations when we had this conversation several years ago, I believe, is it wasn't really a financially feasible goal. And that is why other bogs are going out of production, right? It has a lot to do with whether anybody can even break even doing that
I'm
business.
sure in some cases. Probably not every case, but I'm sure in some.
Yes, sir.
If I can, so, again, this is a topic nobody wants to talk about, and I wanna move on from it too myself, to be honest with you, because I think we're just spinning the wheels all the time. It isn't gonna happen. Mark, I love you to death for doing this and trying to do that, and I've tried, but I think it's a moot point. And what I would suggest, if that's all gonna be conservation area as we discussed in the plan, we've got other property in the town of Harwich that we could utilize for agriculture. Mr. Texera's old farm on Queen Anne Road. Why don't we take that effort and make that an agricultural use and let somebody lease that piece of property? That's a viable piece of property for agriculture. If that's under our jurisdiction, isn't it?
Texera it's also in a zone 2, so we'd have to check about some limitations there. But the community gardens,
No, I know, I was
3
gonna- I
acres
was
up
gonna
there,
say- yeah,
you're
right,
gonna
you
go
got-
there too, yeah?
You got the community gardens, we have that, we're using that. So maybe we just look at other properties that we have and try to do an agricultural entity at that might be better suited for an upland upland agricultural commodities that could be utilized. And I think Texera's would be perfect, because Mr. Texera used to grow great corn and strawberries there for years, so it wouldn't hurt to put it back in there.
Where is Texera's?
On Queen Anne Road, go down 124, take a right on Queen Anne Road, just after Oak Street, on the right-hand side, is a big open field there.
Oh, there, right.
That's
And it
Texera's
actually
farm.
was purchased, I believe, for conservation or agriculture.
Right, and that field is more or less open still.
Yeah, and
It's
that was a
Bluebird
beautiful
field.
farm, beautiful farm. So it would be nice, you know, if we wanted to talk about those discussions, there's other opportunities maybe we can look at to offset some of these things, so that now we have a viable plan for our town properties. This is there, that's there, this makes sense, blah, 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 and go forward, because, like I said in the last meeting, I think it's over, so. I'm gonna fight on my piece of property, I'm gonna keep cranberries there as long as I can go, so, that's private. That's it, that's all I gotta say.
If I could follow, Mr. Chairman, I just think you've got the economic argument, that's one thing. But really important to this commission before was the environmental gains. Conservation land that has these present conditions, a lot of environmental gains could be realized by not leasing that to cranberry bogs. It's not unique, but it's still a flow-through that connects back to Herring River at a really important part at the upper end of the tidal zone. So really, I think that those environmental gains are gonna be, in my mind, a tough challenge to have, you know, a vote to turn this around. I think we can go to public hearing, and I think it's gonna be tight. So, you know, are we spinning our wheels? I think we might be. Secondly, there still could be something done with the upland bog and maybe the fringe thing. I think there's still some opportunities there. Maybe you can do it at 2 places, and then maybe you can teach kids how to, you know, get in the business of raising some of these environmental plants, mitigation plants. So I wouldn't discard that concept. I just think the cranberries at this location, you know, given everything we've talked about, I think it's gonna be a tough one to win. That's my feeling.
Wayne, you got anything further to say?
Unfortunately, I do. I love the cranberry business, but in that bog there, you're wasting your time to even think about putting it out to lease, because nobody in their right mind is gonna lease it unless they've got more money than brains. Because it would cost a fortune to bring that thing back to where it'd be a viable operating cranberry bog. And now, because it's gone so far, then it's not easy to do, it's very, very expensive. Unfortunately, I mean, I would love to see it back the way it was 50 years ago, but not gonna happen.
I do like the idea of pursuing other areas in town where we bought the property for joint potential purpose. There are some upland areas that are not near sensitive wetland resource areas, don't have to worry about a herring run. So that's very much in favor of looking at those.
One thing you could do down there, in the depot bog, is if you want to have some sort of agricultural thing for people to, like, townspeople to go in and pick things, they get a little bit of patch there, they pick cranberries, till that all goes to heck. But plant some upland blueberry plants. Blueberries thrive in those old bogs like crazy. And what's better than to walk around there with your kids and pick blueberries in the end of the summer, you know? And what the heck, you know, at least it's some sort of agriculture, and
Let's hope they're not allergic to poison ivy.
or snakes.
Well, that's fine. Just to revisit one thing briefly, there was a conversation about doing something with the open area down to Berry Patch Farm.
Yes, Sisson Road.
Yeah, Sisson Road. And that conversation just never went any further. But that is a parcel that should be given some consideration to.
It's 3 acres, that's currently just a field. 3 acres is the community gardens, and then the north 3 acres are just a field that we've maintained as a field. We got some bees up there.
Why don't we,
There are people who are interested in it.
yeah, why don't we buy 100 upland blueberry plants this spring and put them in the ground up there at Depot Bog and get started?
Good idea.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I'm not
So
opposed
where
to
would,
that.
you'd put them all the way north, Bog, or
I'm
in
not
the?
sure, you'd have to go up and look at it, but
Where it's
either,
not too
I
high.
think you can put them just about anywhere, because they thrive on those old bogs. They really do.
And would that be inclined to suppress or at least reduce the amount of other stuff growing in that area?
Yeah, it would, because once they get mature, they would shade out some things. I'm not sure, it wouldn't control everything, but
Yeah, right.
it would help, yeah.
There's an old bog in Dennis, up the Weir River system, with the town managers,
Mhm.
and they let people come in and pick.
Yeah, people would love that.
And that's tiny, you know, you could do something on a much bigger scale
Sure.
here. And, yeah, people go in there and they get the berries so quick, because
Yeah.
they love it.
They get the big rabbit eyes, the high bush, hybrid plants, and
Yeah.
it'd be
So
great.
I think there's.
And the
there's
birds
things-
love them too, so.
There's things we can
Win-win.
revisit, and I think the intention's there. So, yeah, let's talk about them. And, Amy, you probably have a better sense of the whole concept of harvesting wetland plants for mitigation. Is that even a viable thing, or is that disruptive to habitat? Do you need like a commercial vendor to manage it?
I mean, you're looking,
At the blueberries?
No, I'm thinking, you know, have blueberries, tons of blueberries, but also have a section that grows mitigation plants.
Oh, I see what you're
Maybe you
saying.
do it to demonstrate to kids how to do that work, or you truly have a
Lot of
source for mitigation.
In many cases, they're
also,
container grown.
Okay.
if we, I don't know about the commercial aspect of it.
Mark said they're often container grown. when
Yeah,
It's produced.
yeah.
But then people were
Well, and then you
apparently
have
in
to
digging something.
Dig them up out of a wetland, that's not something we would really want either.
Very labor intensive too.
But they can, so what they do is we do let, some, what's it, Northeast Wildflower, I don't know, harvest seed from a lot of these plants to then grow wherever they grow them. So we let them harvest seed, but not plants.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we get started? Let's appropriate some money, buy 100 plants of,
And
those
then
blueberries.
have a
Put 'em
work
in this
day?
spring.
Probably be good
Are
to
you
have in a
volunteering to
certain
organize a
area,
work day,
because
Wayne?
you could say, okay, that's an area that people can pick versus the other
Yeah.
areas, keep it natural.
Sure. you find an area that's easy for them to get to, and
Yeah, we don't have any, well, we do have, I mean, we have wetlands funds, which we need to use for the Herring River study, but we do have wetlands funds, and that's for the purpose of improving wetlands, and what, a way to improve wetlands is to bring in wetland plants, so.
exactly.
So it's not out of the question, but I just don't know what money we have.
Should we get out there this spring as a group and walk around to those
We
different
should.
areas? and,
Take some little orange flags and stick them wherever we think a plant should be, and count out 100 of
We're
them,
in the area, yeah.
and
So, but if you
get some
want,
prisoners from the jail, come down, dig the holes and plant them.
Yeah, America.
if you want 100 blueberry plants, though, you gotta be telling someone pretty much now that you want them, I would think.
Yeah, you'd have to check with
Put an
them.
order in.
Yeah, you might not even get them now.
It's
Maybe
possible.
too late this year already.
It's something you have to check into.
Or could we do that in the fall? Would that be a reasonable thing?
Spring's always better.
Spring's the best, yeah.
You could probably do, like, we used to purchase for short money bare root seedlings,
Yeah,
Yeah, but-
for cheap, $1 or $2 a piece.
yeah, just,
Bare root's easier than, but they don't, it's a little bit harder to take, you get
it's
more
a rate's
mortality.
not that good, yeah.
Yeah, but it,
And
You oughta
everybody
get
loves
2 or
to
3
eat those
gallon
things.
potted plants.
And the birds too.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, I planted like 3 bare root maples,
Yeah.
and I had them in a pot and then I put them in the ground, and since they went into the ground, they're getting nibbled.
yeah.
like-
With blueberries too, you might have to
Well, my blue-
protect them
Right.
when they're
So
small.
it's not just putting them in the ground, it's putting fence around each one. Or putting a tube around or something, right?
Well, you know.
We'll have to
it's
see.
Another one of those things, we
Or you
can, we
might-
come up with an idea and we kill it by getting into the weeds, so to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah.
Well,
I mean,
I-
plant 100, if 50 make it, great.
There you go,
Mhm.
yeah. Gotta try,
It's an
it. Gotta-
idea. So,
journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step.
Yeah,
Exactly.
sounds good.
so can we kind of agree on some priorities that we can put in our list? I mean, it seems like we had some consensus about, one of my priorities was moving the parking areas to get them farther from resource areas on Bell's
Right.
Neck Road. I was not even thinking of the end of North Road, but that's a good idea.
I mean, the north side of the footbridge on North.
North side of the bridge, yeah.
And there's erosion problems there too, right? Or something, people were sliding in the fill at the north.
Not as much anymore, because we did the fix. But on the south side of the bridge, we're gonna have to look for a longer-term solution.
So that's on the longer term list, but on the short term priorities, right?
Well, I guess would it make sense to change the parking area if potentially they were gonna be considering in a year or 2 or 3 to put a road through here? I mean, I don't know. That parking area, what I'm not as concerned about is the one that's by the kiosk on the Bell's Neck Road, that's
Right.
like very close to the edge of the wetland, and that could easily be moved farther upland. And then closing off some of the pull-offs that people have used, just create 1 or 2 larger parking areas to, and then if you wanted to do fencing along the road there to get, because there's, on Bell's Neck Road at the reservoir, there's 2 or 3 large openings now where people launch their personal watercraft and go fishing. Have one big one. Shut the other ones off till, and then replug them. But if you wanted to put fence there, we'd have to apply to you folks, because that is putting just like we had to do for after the fact for the North Road little bridge work, because it's, it's a new structure in the 0 to 50, so.
Should we make some sort of not a boat ramp, but some kind of, is there something that should be made there? for
Well, maybe
launching?
that's something to talk about when we talk about grading of the road and everything like that, is make more defined access points to our resources.
I'd love to get out there and hear what Mark's thinking about specifically, and I've been there plenty, but I think getting there as a group might be helpful.
We do have an engineering company on retainer, GHD, but we'd have to, if you really wanted to pursue it, I mean, I could ask. if they could meet with us and take a look at it.
Well, it's gonna be a significant amount of work to go through and revitalize that entire road. I mean, it's not gonna be $1 million job, but it's, you know, it's a pretty good project.
Yeah.
And to have the documentation in place, whether the plan is used this year or 3 years from now, that part's gotta be done to kick it off, so.
So that sounds to me like it's an area for grant funding somewhere, looking for grants. And I don't know where exactly, but if we're talking multiple tens of thousands of dollars, up to 6 figures, then it's not coming out of the wetlands budget, right? Or are you thinking it would?
No.
Yeah, so,
I mean, we're gonna be
So-
going to a grant funding workshop next week, so, I have a couple that might qualify for it for another round. Part of if you watched the selectmen's meeting this past week, the Natural Resource Conservation Service was proposing, they've been working with myself and Heinz and Link Cooper to come up with a project list of a few environmental restoration projects. And I wasn't gonna bring it up to you guys yet, cause it's still kind of in its infancy and planning, but I'm more than happy to. But one of the things that can get funded is stormwater. And this might be a project for that farther down the road. But the two projects that we've decided this year to tackle and design would be fully paid for by Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is through the USDA. Planning is fully funded, permitting would be on the town, and installation of work is 75% federal and 25% match. So the two ones we're looking at are underneath 124, going in the herring restoration, underneath the road into Long Pond, as well as the upper reaches of Cold Brook. Going down the road, because Fisk Passage is a huge part of things. Brad's been very involved in it. Going forward, though, all this conversation about the upper reaches of north of the West Reservoir with how choked everything is, that would be my next candidate for potential funding for fixing that. But something like this, what I'm gonna say is like stormwater potentially could, in the future, come into play with that too.
There are
And
also
that's-
like MVP grants for
there's
the line
MV
roads and things like that.
Yeah, MVP grants for low-lying roads and a few other things, but
Not to get too far off topic, but did they bring up, or did you bring up the Witchmere Harbor drain? In terms of stormwater shellfish movements? They might
they
not-
not for this immediate round, but it is on their list.
Oh, good.
And I've talked with Don Liptak, and I've had a initial conversation with MassDOT. I had a Zoom call with some representatives from MassDOT, and they were all excited, and I haven't heard anything.
Yeah,
And it's been months. So,
they've got a new team, and I think it's a better opportunity.
okay,
There's a lot of culvert money around, from US
Yeah.
DOT to Mass DOT.
Yep.
So I think,
yeah, that's a big one too.
yeah, I'd like to push it through my day job, but it's really a shellfish project, stormwater shellfish project.
Yeah,
So, but I think it's one that we'd like to see.
Yep.
happen. Thank you for that.
so,
What's
Just-
the deal on the bridge up there, Headwaters? I
Yeah.
read somewhere recently they're gonna replace that?
starting on the 27th, Azalea Drive,
Yeah,
it's an exempted project.
is it? Okay, I was
Mhm.
wondering, 'cause I was
They're
up there yesterday, and I
replacing-
saw stakes all over the place.
It's gonna be big bridge. It's gonna take, the document said like 18 months, but I think they added a year. I think it's 6 months.
A lot of water
It's
going down the river right now.
Starting Monday.
Yeah?
So-
And Heinz, made sure with Heinz and the river and the herring passage that it was gonna be okay.
And any silt producing activities in the river,
I know,
are there?
yeah.
See, I got a problem with these exemptions like that, but DOT has certain exemptions. why in the world the Wetlands Protection Act would go along with that. It just,
Isn't that, that's a town road, how is it the state's doing it?
they have the exemptions.
Because it's the herring,
Because
because
on
it's the
the-
run, right?
I don't know, it's gotta be a state
Yeah.
road to pull that exemption, and, yeah.
I was very surprised when I read that, and I said, really? I don't remember that coming before the Concom.
Hopefully they've got some containment all the same,
We have, we can share with you the plans.
but there's no approval step, there's no, yeah.
Nope, we went back and forth for a little while, because at first I wasn't, and I don't remember off the top of my head what the exemption state was, but we went back and forth a few times, and I said, I don't think you're exempt, and then I forget what it was exactly, but I'd have to go reach back into my memery and my emails.
They issue a stop work order on Monday morning,
No.
as soon as they get out of their pickup trucks.
There's no opportunity for that, right? There really isn't. I've seen a lot of problems with these exempt structures over the years, just,
Chris, what is it, it's
State
March
property.
first, March 1st, and the herring gonna start running in about another month, a month and a half?
The town.
without the exemption, they couldn't work that time of year.
Yeah,
Would not be allowed
I don't
by
know
us.
when in-water work is going to be, there's a lot of shoulder work, there's a lot of,
Hopefully they're sequencing, something's going on.
I'll locate it and we'll pass it on to you.
yeah, I'd like to see the plan myself,
It's a big bridge.
yeah.
So do you expect what they're doing there to have any impact on flow?
They have to maintain flow, that's
Or
one of the.
maintain, but not improve? I mean, nothing's happened, it's not like a culvert that's being replaced that
think it
will
will
allow
improve
freer
slightly.
flow, or?
It's not a big choke point
It
there.
says it's owned by the town.
Yeah, it is, I know
I
this.
know that
Yeah,
too. It's not no state thing.
yeah.
It's not gonna further restrict flow, if anything, it's gonna open it up more.
What about the disturbance to the soil during this period and running downstream as the poor
Mhm.
herring are coming upstream, they get their
Mhm.
noses full of silt?
At this time of the year.
It's not allowed without an exemption, just, that's what happens. Well, I would love to have us schedule a site visit to go look at the North Road as well as the bogs and just talk about these issues. I think we could really make a lot of progress if we could spend an hour at both sites, talk
Okay.
about plantings.
When do you wanna go?
Should we make it an agenda item, or we just have our meeting down there?
That's
No, really,
fine.
post
An
a meeting.
on-site meeting. yeah,
On-site
we-
meeting.
We actually.
Yeah.
How about Wednesday's meeting,
Yeah.
this,
and then-
this next week? Let's do it out
No,
there.
I'm just saying, some other afternoon, that would be good.
Sure.
I wonder if we can get some blueberry plants out of the SCS,
Probably.
Soil Conservation Service.
Was that Steve Spears?
Yeah, they might be either be able to get them for us or get them, or lead us somewhere we can get them inexpensively. You don't wanna go to a retail outfit to buy them.
So are you gonna look into that, Wayne?
I will.
And then it's really about organizing a group of people who are willing to go out there with shovels and plant them, right?
We can also make it an AmeriCorps project.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, I would put it out to,
Yeah, I'll check with,
Well, we got a new sheriff. I wonder if she'd be interested in producing some assistance out of the county jail.
Yeah, the sheriff's department.
I want the horse, I wanna get my dark glasses on, my cowboy hat.
Sheriff Colson.
all right, do we wanna schedule
Okay.
other meetings while we're here, or no? Or do you wanna,
Well, can we just, before we do that,
yeah,
can we just close out what we're doing with this document?
okay?
Since we've been sort of afield a little bit here. And my sense is we should delegate to you to put together whatever ideas we've discussed, what's on Mark's sheet, and whatever comments
Okay,
are in here.
we can do that.
And you put together the action items in particular and make the edits that that we've talked about and that you're thinking about there, and come up with something that we can consider to be like a almost final draft that we can then talk about the specific action items that are in there and make sure we agree on all those things, and maybe next time vote on that, or, I mean, eventually, we need to vote as a body, right, to agree that this is our land management
Yes, you
plan.
do.
Yes, sir.
Before we do any type of vote, don't we need to have a public hearing?
I think, okay, so my take on that is, two of the three people here who I think were starting to advocate for a change in the plans for the cranberry bog, I heard them concede defeat. Did I hear you right?
Not defeat.
Not
Oh, excuse me.
Pretty harsh word, no.
Okay, so concede that this isn't gonna happen.
may
So
settle
my sense about this is that, is that if anybody wants to bring this up again and talk about having a public hearing, that's always a possibility.
Sure.
And that might happen, but it shouldn't hold up what we're doing with this document. So, and, excuse me, I'll revise what I said. You conceded that you didn't think this was gonna happen anytime soon, so.
That's true.
I think we might need a public hearing, period,
For the.
to make
the land
change,
management
yeah.
is what he's asking.
Okay.
Which is
Yeah.
fine, but I would just say err on the side of caution,
So,
and have a
but-
public hearing, just in general.
It's a
But
good
John,
idea.
I
just
would
to
agree with
let them
Amy,
know.
because
Yeah,
we're
no
taking a
question.
plan that was approved, went through public hearings, was approved by vote of the board. We're updating it, we're going to vote on it as a board on the update, but I think we need a public hearing
Yeah.
on the updates.
Okay, but we should wait until we're all comfortable that
Oh,
this is
yeah.
a final.
Yeah, so
Oh,
we
product.
need
no,
at least
definitely,
one more
yeah.
work session, at least
Yeah.
one more.
Right.
To follow on that, do you want to save the track changes and then proceed from there? I've got,
I've done that.
you have, okay.
Mhm.
Because what I have is a lot of bullets, comments from John and myself, that I have notes that pending action.
Yep.
So a lot of the comments need work.
I've started going through those.
Okay. And then, so you're gonna save,
There's,
yep,
yep,
save the other comments, and then the next draft will start from there.
yep.
And I think that'll really start to take shape.
And then we'll pay specific attention to section 5, which is the goals.
Yep.
Okay?
So do we want an actual incorporated short and long-term list of goals in like a specific list, or do you want it incorporated throughout?
I think that it's way more effective in the document to have a bulleted
A
list.
specific list.
Bulleted list so that it's very clear and, you know, people aren't going through the document and trying to pull out exactly what is gonna happen. I mean, the narrative has to still be there,
Yeah.
but in the end, you just want a very clear list.
The first
Kind of like
document had-
amended
had
amended
recommendations
goals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
in the amendment, in the narrative, but it didn't have the list. So I
Yeah,
think
right.
That would be an improvement, I think. You had to like look and find the recommendations in the old document.
Yeah, no, we can improve on that.
Mark?
Amy, just to add one thing to your list, I don't view relocating the parking areas as a particularly difficult item.
I don't either.
And with, with the assistance of DPW, perhaps we could work that into it. Unless I misunderstood or didn't hear that, did you already say that?
No, I think I would consider that a lower hanging fruit that we could do in-house.
I agree.
We would probably, because you're taking a parking area that's very close to a resource and moving it out, I don't think it requires like a hearing to do that. Like under wetlands protection, it would be, either administrative, probably administrative. But we would, we'd wanna know, like, if you're abandoning this parking area, how are we gonna restore that area and keep people from parking there, and what are you gonna do to create the new one? But no, that's a probably within the next year project.
Right. Well, through the additional plants that we're talking about purchasing, maybe there needs to be some consideration to bring in some vegetation help revitalize those areas as well.
Yep. The herring run, we also need to do a little bit more at. The hardest part with that is watering, everything. So we may have to have some volunteers if we do put these plants in, for who's gonna help water them for the first year or two till they get established. We already do a little bit of that, we barely have time.
So
But
where
we'll
would that
work on
water
that.
come from?
we just take a watering can and fill it up in the reservoir, and,
You've got 100
Here.
plants there, though.
yeah, that wouldn't work. Well, the 100 plants for the blueberries,
They-
the
they-
blueberries probably wouldn't need it,
Yeah.
because
No.
in the bogs, there's water not too far down. They'll
Right.
they'll
You
keep
can
their
pull a
feet
hole.
wet. I'm talking about in the parking areas,
Oh, that's,
Um,
right, I see.
or by the herring run. That's where we've had to, it's compact, it's dry. But yeah, in the bogs, you wouldn't need to water them.
Pretty self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once-
But even in the parking areas, I mean, even in the hottest time of the year, it's gonna be fairly shaded,
Yeah,
so we're only talking about watering once a week.
yeah, it's not much, but it's just an
It's-
additional task.
It's a
to keep in mind.
confrontable issue.
Yes.
I'm looking for the place where I put a comment that there would need to be a specific operation plan for water control in the bogs.
Uh-huh.
And, that's not here now, but I'd like to take a crack at drafting that, but it really is gonna depend on the expertise of the guys that, know how to move water, so.
That's real easy to do, especially on that bog. Either put the boards in or take them out, one of the two.
But seasonal directions, here's what you do, here's your elevation target. You wanna get water for the plants, and maybe we wanna try to keep the vines viable for a while for pick your own opportunities. So I think that water plan will be important. I think it should be in this document, but it's not there
Yeah,
now.
it's gonna play
It
a
could be a
big part into
one-pager, appendix,
what type of plants you get growing back there,
yeah.
as to where you keep your water level.
Yeah, you don't wanna drown them out, get root rot and every other damn thing.
If you want more wetland
As long as
plan.
there's water in the ditches, it should be fine.
Okay.
Well, mosquito control's got thoughts on that.
Yeah, so that's the other
We
piece.
wanna run that draft by them. We don't wanna have a chance for herring to be attracted to the downstream opening of the outlet. There's a couple things that we should be thinking about.
Yeah, like the flow pattern in theory is very easy at that bog, but the other factors make it harder.
Couple moving parts.
Okay.
So, one more work session.
I think so?
After a site visit or?
After,
Well,
after,
After
Well-
a site, well, my complication is I'm not around for the next month. I'll be here on Wednesday and then I'll be gone. I guess I shouldn't be saying that, but I think the site visit should go ahead during the month of March or before if that's possible. And maybe we can,
we could do this.
April isn't bad though, just to, see things starting to
well,
come out.
okay, well, what do you think?
It's up to you. March is, our schedule's already very, very booked for March, and I'm off a few days towards the end of the month, so I would prefer April, but we could do it, at least, if we wanted to do a site walk in March, we can make that happen. But an on-site, it would be hard to do a site walk without having to come back here and then review a document. So I think the site walk should be separate.
We do March 31st.
We could do March 31st.
What day?
It's a Friday. I'll be back that day, the day before,
Oh, it's for a site walk, is that what you're
for a
suggesting?
site walk.
Are you back then, John?
I think so.
Is that okay?
Let's
And
just do
then-
that. I should be, I gotta look at my,
What did you say? What was the date?
March 31st, Friday.
Can we do it 1 PM instead of 2? That way we have plenty of time to walk all over the place. And then,
Rain date?
Snow date, maybe.
Friday after?
yeah, the Friday after,
Which would be
the 7th.
April 7th.
Be able to see some fish then, would be good.
Yeah. And how about we do
Yeah, that's great.
for the
What are we saying? The 31st and the
31st
7th?
with a rain date of the 7th, and then how about the 14th for our last work session for the document? April 14.
Still at 1.
Does 1 o'clock work okay for people?
1 o'clock? Sure.
Sure.
April 14th, so 1 PM work session. We can send you an email with all this
Yeah,
too.
that'd be helpful.
Okay? Got it. We'll try to be in this room again. Okay. That's all I got.
Any other comments, discussion?
If we have questions, we'll reach out.
I'll get a hold of the FCS on Monday and see if they can help us with some plants and
That would
see
be
what
great.
happens. We do 100 this year, 100 next year, and do it for 5 years, and you'll have 500 plants up there. Survival rate of 75%, you'll end up with 400 roughly, and people will be happy. Happy, happy, happy.
So with the
See
wildlife.
blueberry pies everywhere.
My favorite pie, type of pie.
And muffins, yes.
Blueberry is my favorite pie.
Okay. Well, on that note,
Make someone happy for once, wouldn't that be
That's,
something?
yeah.
Smile.
Yeah, what's a shot?
occasionally,
Yeah,
Don't worry, be happy. Good song.
we usually,
All right.
not on it, pay a lot of share.
yes, I'm waiting for a
I'll
motion.
make a motion that we adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.